Greetings. My name is Yashwant Prakash Vyas. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the Assistant Director for Diversity Resources in the Division of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion here at the University of Iowa. I also hold an adjunct instructor appointment with our university college. Thank you for joining us today for our event. The mission of the Global Education Lecture Series is to discuss issues facing international educational interchange, engage in shared scholarship, and to be in community. Our lives have and continue to change, and constantly navigating uncertainty is exhausting. The impacts of ongoing and deep rooted racial injustices have only been compounded by the public health crisis and natural disasters. Further, over past few years, certain public policies have challenged our ability to facilitate and engage in global education. But these unprecedented situations have also highlighted the need for and importance of international educational interchange through scholars and professionals around the world coming together to address the complex issues facing our global community. Today, we'll discuss how two creative writing and cultural exchange programs hosted by the University of Iowa's International Writing Program, IWP, have adapted during the pandemic to support international educational interchange during uncertain times. So, let us start our conversation today by recognizing Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of this land. This recognition is a first step towards understanding the long standing history that has brought us to reside on this land and to understand our place within this history. With permission from the University of Iowa's Native American Council, I will now read a land acknowledgement they have created. In doing so, I also want to recognize my limitations and apologize for any mispronunciations. I can do better and I will do better. Meanwhile, I ask for your grace and forgiveness. The University of Iowa is located on the homelands of the Chippewa, Iowa, Kickapoo, Menominee, Miami, Missouri, Omaha, Osage, Otto, Ottawa, Ponca, Potawatomi, Sac and Fox, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, three affiliated tribes, and Winnebago nations. The following tribal nations: Omaha Tribe of Nebraska and Iowa, Ponca Tribe of Nebraska, Sac and Fox of the Mississippi in Iowa, and Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska nations continue to thrive in the state of Iowa, and we continue to acknowledge them. As an academic institution, it is our responsibility to acknowledge the sovereignty and the traditional territories of these tribal nations and the treaties that were used to remove these tribal nations and the histories of dispossession that have allowed for the growth of this institution since 1847. Consistent with the university's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, understanding the historical and current experiences of Native peoples will help inform the work we do collectively as a university to engage in building relationships through academic scholarships, collaborative partnerships, community service, enrollment, and retention efforts, acknowledging our past, our present, and future Native nations. Again, I want to acknowledge and thank the University of Iowa's Native American Council for their leadership in creating this land acknowledgement for our institution. Moving forward, please help me welcome today's panelists. Our first panelist is Dr. Alisa Weinstein. Dr. Weinstein received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Drama and a Master of Arts in Educational Theater from New York University and a PhD in anthropology from Syracuse University. She also studied at Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi and conducted dissertation research on a Fulbright Nehru Scholarship. Among her writings, she authored scripts for India's Sesame Street, Gully Gully Sim Sim, and is currently at work on an ethnography on tailors working in Jaipur, India. A co-founder of Home Ec workshop in Iowa City, she often teaches knitting and sewing to crafters of all ages and serves as the youth programs coordinator for the International Writings Program at the University of Iowa. Dr. Weinstein, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you.
Our next panelist, or our second panelist, is Dr. Peter Gerlach. Dr. Gerlach is the Summer Institute Coordinator at the University of Iowa's International Writing Program. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Ripon College and Master of Arts degree in English from the University of Northern Colorado. After serving in the US Peace Corps in Mongolia, he earned a PhD in Cultural Foundations of Education from Syracuse University. Since 2004, he has taught university students in subjects such as composition and literature, English as a foreign language, qualitative research, and international education. In addition to the IWP, where he has been since 2018, he is adjunct assistant professor in the University of Iowa's International Studies program. Welcome, Dr. Gerlach, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our conversation today. And so my very first question to start our conversation is to tell us a little about the International Writings Program. The University of Iowa is known for its International Writing Program. And so we would love to hear from you a little bit about the program and the role the International Writings Program has played in fostering a community during this pandemic. So let me start with you, Dr. Weinstein, and then we'll go to Dr. Gerlach.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to everyone who's here joining us today. And thank you, Yashwant, for the warm introduction and for your work with the Global Education Lecture Series and giving us this opportunity to share what we've been doing at the International Writing Program, particularly during the pandemic, which sadly is becoming more tragic and dire right now in India and so many parts of the world that IWP programs reach. But still throughout the pandemic, our efforts have continued and in new ways to bring young writers together from around the world to hone their craft and to cultivate greater understanding of one another's cultures, including the culturally diverse experiences within the US. And in response to the drive of many of our participants in the past year to support ways they can turn their shared love of writing and sense of community into forms of social action. But just to tell you a bit more about the International Writing Program, it was founded in 1967 by Paul and Hualing Engel. So that's almost 55 years ago. And we're part of the U-Iowa framework known as the Writing University, is one of about 30 departments, programs, and centers at the University of Iowa, which of course is widely recognized as an academic home for creative writing. And we're in Iowa City, a UNESCO City of Literature. Our director at IWP is Christopher Merrill. And what IWP really does that differentiates us is cultural diplomacy through creative writing, or creative writing through cultural diplomacy. It runs in both directions. And we receive support from the US Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and work closely with an incredible ECA program officer, Jill Staggs, to offer a range of programs. And many have been going on for years. And then we're always moving in new directions as needs and circumstances around the world change and as the literary world changes. So what many people are familiar with is IWP's long-running fall residency, where each year, 20 to 30 published writers and influential thinkers from around the world come to live in Iowa City for 10 or 12 weeks and they participate in many events around the university in Iowa City, at the public library, at Prairie Lights Bookstore. They do readings of their work at IWP's home, Shambaugh House. They join International Literature Today courses. But IWP also offers distance learning programs, and these have been going on even pre-pandemic, and they're free online creative writing and literary courses that address many themes such as disability awareness or climate change. And we also do Lines and Spaces tours where US writers travel overseas for workshops and readings. And then we do 2 really great youth-oriented summer programs, Between the Lines and the Summer Institute. And these are our 2 programs, and Peter and I adapted them differently during the pandemic. And I think we learned a lot from trying varied approaches, which we're going to highlight here. So I'll talk more today about Between the Lines, the program I coordinate that is for high school students in creative writing and intercultural exchange. And Peter will tell you more about his perspectives, which have emerged from the Summer Institute.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Weinstein. And Dr. Gerlach, your response to the same question.
Yeah, and Elisa has done a wonderful job in really sharing everything that the IWP is doing. And I'll say also, I appreciate so much the chance that you've given us to talk about the really good work I think we're doing with Between the Lines, the Summer Institute, and all the IWP programs. So I'll address sort of the second half of the question you asked. How have we played a role in fostering community during the pandemic? Well, I'd say it's been how we've been intentional in our efforts to provide meaningful programming and to create opportunities for virtual engagement between writers across borders. For the programs Elisa and I run, our students tell us when they're applicants that they seek to improve their writing skills, a practice of great significance to them personally. And they seek to find like-minded counterparts in other countries with whom to forge fellowship through creative expression and through a range of personal and cultural differences and similarities. Students reiterate these goals over the span of participation and even after. They support and learn from one another to become better writers, and they become friends, lifelong, we hope, over all they have in common and in the ways their differences unite them. The IWP has faithfully created spaces where all of this is possible during a time when it has been needed the most. As one Summer Institute participant put it, I'll miss the writing and the lectures, but most of all, I will miss the unconditional love and support I received from my IWP family. I will miss how much light this program has spread despite the darkness of a hard year. So in this regard, the Summer Institute community will have renewed purpose this June. As our students, a third of our group will need all of our love and support during this challenging time. And of course, this is true for all IWP students in so many countries around the world right now with the ongoing pandemic.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your response. And it looks like some amazing, wonderful things happening at the International Writings Program, despite the continued challenges that we are facing. And I'm just excited to hear all the wonderful things, and it makes me want to be in the program. I'm not a writer, but just to be in community and just to engage with folks who have such different perspectives and life experiences and contribute to our world in so many wonderful ways. So I appreciate you sharing about the International Writings Program. So just connected to that, I know you mentioned the 2 programs that you both individually oversee. And so, so moving forward, can you please share a little bit about your individual programs? So let's continue with Dr. Gerlach, and then I'll come back to you, Dr. Weinstein.
I'd love to begin. And I'll say too, I'll echo what you just said. I would love to be a participant in one of these programs. It's fun from this side, but wow, to be a participant too. Right, so the Summer Institute, this program was modeled off of BTL, actually, a longer standing program, which Alisa will talk about in a little bit. The Summer Institute is funded by the US Embassy in Islamabad, Pakistan. The brilliant idea behind the program, and all credit here goes to my IWP colleagues as grant writing preceded me, has been to bring young people together from across a historically conflicted border between India and Pakistan. And the medium for doing this is creative writing. This is something the IWP has been doing a long time, I should note. For example, the IWP has brought together writers from Israel and Palestine during the fall residency. And Chris Merrill reminded me that some years ago, as he said, we hosted a 3-day workshop in Yerevan for Armenian and Turkish writers, which the embassy then expanded the next year to include Russia and Ukraine, Georgia, Turkey, and Armenia, with IWP alumni serving as faculty, as the teachers. So for this program, most young people in Pakistan and India have never met someone from the other side of the border, which was partitioned by the British Raj in 1947. In fact, most Indians and Pakistanis, regardless of their age or station in life, do not have the opportunity to travel to the other side of the border. Visas to the other side are difficult to get. They require a specific purpose, and if successfully attained, they greatly limit the traveler to both time spent and locations visited. In the Summer Institute, they're able to meet, to become friends, and to collaborate with one another and their American counterparts. Students from the US, whether familiar or not with South Asia, get a deep dive into the writing cultures and the literature of an exciting region of the world, and the opportunity to make friends around the globe. International experience for them and for all of our participants is incredibly important in an ever globalizing and interconnecting world. So we bring together 10 diverse and truly talented college-age students from Pakistan, 10 from India, and 10 from the US, to engage one another cross-culturally and, as we've said, through creative writing. In addition, we list the talents and teaching of 3 writing mentors, one from each country. And we cover topics in the Summer Institute related to the craft of writing, as you would expect, in really all genres, but in particular fiction, poetry, and the specialty of the mentors. We discuss the South Asia context, partition, and its ever-present and truly challenging legacies, the long-standing humanitarian crisis in the northern region of Kashmir on both the Indian and Pakistani sides, as well as the cultural, linguistic, religious, historical, and other dimensions of present-day life in the subcontinent. We talk about empathy across borders and how the US and South Asia inform each other in the areas of literature and writing, and even further beyond, of course. And we talk about the importance of collaboration, the ways in which writers are leaders within their communities, and of creative partnerships between and across countries and cultures. The first iteration of the program was in 2019, when by the program's original design, we brought the cohort here to the University of Iowa campus for a 2-week session that July. It was an intensive and dynamic experience for our participants. The second iteration, of course, much changed. It spanned from June 2020 until March of this year and was virtual, as will the third iteration, a 2-week session coming up this June. And I'll stop there for a moment, as I know we'll get into more of what things have been like virtually soon in a minute.
Absolutely. I am just so pleased as you were sharing all the opportunities that the program has afforded individuals to come together. And I am amazed what our love for art, for education, can do to bring us together and to engage and collaborate and share those ideas and perspectives is just simply outstanding. So I appreciate, thank you for sharing that with us. And then Dr. Weinstein, if you could share a little bit about your program.
Yeah, I'd love to. Between the Lines has been running as a 2-week residential program on the University of Iowa campus since 2008. And even during the pandemic, virtually, we offered our two-week sessions, which are BTL, Peace in the Writing Experience, which is sponsored by the U.S. State Department Cultural Affairs Division. And our 40 to 50 participants are from the US, and they're also international. Recently, we've had participants from about 20 different countries join us. In 2019, they were able to come here, and in 2020, we were virtual. And then our BTL Identity and Belonging session, that one is supported by the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Arts Building Bridges program, whose mission is to promote the study, understanding, and appreciation of Muslim arts and cultures. And so we do that by bringing together a total of 20 Muslim and non-Muslim high school students to write and rewrite their perspectives and to develop mutual understanding in order to build more inclusive communities. And this session is all US-based participants with a focus on amplifying the voices of young writers from marginalized communities. And we get applicants and have participants join from at least 20 states around the US between our 2 sessions. And so in both of our sessions, between the lines, the young people come together to write and to strengthen their voices, to deepen their empathy and understanding of one another's cultures and backgrounds. And we explore themes of identity, belonging, and peace through reading and writing. They're cultivating their own writing practices in workshops. And then at the same time, they're reading and discussing literature and getting to meet and work with poets and authors who might be new to them and from parts of the world where they hadn't read literature before. And like one of our participants let us know how heartening it was to get to be with these mentors, even virtually. She described it as, I'm getting to meet the person that I want to be when I grow up. So we just have these amazing writers and poets as our core faculty. And some of them are former fall residents, and some of them are alumni of the Iowa Writers Workshop. And our teachers are just so fun and compassionate and such nurturing people. One of our participants last year told us when she was speaking about being in BTL, she said, "I've never been in a group where I felt I could share my thoughts and beliefs free of any judgment. And I believe everyone should have an experience like that." And this is because of the inclusive atmosphere that our wonderful teachers create.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And I am so appreciative of the intentionality of these programs, and in addition to that intentionality, the impact it has had on individuals. And just hearing about some of the impact that you have shared with us is just amazing. And it goes without saying, for like over a year now, right? Higher education in general, we all have been facing different challenges and compounding challenges. And when we take our work, right, in an international context, right, when we are engaging in the context of not just the challenges, the regular challenges, not that there is a competition between compounding challenges, but when we take our work in an international context, right, it can have that compounding effect and compounding challenges. But at the same time, there are also opportunities that come along with unprecedented situations like the one we are in. So can you please share with us some of the challenges and opportunities that have stemmed from implementing your programs virtually? Any lessons that you would like to share with us today?
Yeah, I can start. The biggest challenge of 2020 was our participants' disappointment in not getting to travel to Iowa City and spend time together in person, because that is such a wonderful part of our program, is just, being together and having meals and living in the dorms. And Initially, we told them it was, they had already been selected. We told them it was going to be virtual, and we connected them through a private Facebook group. And within hours, I was watching, and there were hundreds of introductions and messages between these young people. And soon they had organized, they called a meeting because they had concerns about what, how could this be done virtually? And, we listened to them and addressed what they were worried about and just faced the disappointment together. So that was just the initial challenge. And then there were so many time zones that we had to figure out, from California to Dhaka, and, what time can we meet and for how long, and how much is too much Zoom? And it was, summertime in a lot of places. And so I'm wondering, are they going to want to be outside or, join us through screens? And some of our participants had told us, they hadn't had very good experiences because schools had to adapt so suddenly when they went virtual. And so we just had a lot of questions like that. And we just asked ourselves, how can we do this even better? And from what I had understood about online learning was that it was supposed to work best asynchronized. But for between the lines, that wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted to facilitate new relationships and build a community. And I really felt like we needed to do that together, even if it was on Zoom. But what we learned was, to not only use Zoom, that there's an importance in connecting through multiple platforms. And so we considered what are those like in-person activities, and what is the goal of that activity, and how can we translate those experiences into new virtual spaces and still have, a personal inward facing space, and then also create public facing spaces. So like, for example, to build trust in our group of writers, what goes on in our workshops is essentially, more private, even though, being online doesn't ever really feel private. But then we considered, well, what parts of ourselves and this work and the experience of being in BTL do we want to make public and share with the wider world and friends and family, and just have more spaces to share with each other what's going on in our various workshops that are happening, simultaneously and in small groups. And so we used Instagram, as many people have turned to, but we used it as part of the curriculum where participants would document their daily lives and what they were learning in our sessions, and then also what they're doing in their life outside of our Zoom. And they, created posts and images and captions, and then they commented and just like had this space to celebrate this thing that they were a part of. And we had an open mic event, instead of being in person, we did online, and they were just cheering each other on. You really could feel it like you were in the room. And I've become a big fan of using the chat feature on Zoom because of how our participants showed me how much they could use it to support each other. And they had their own language by the time the session was up. And we also published their work in an anthology, and so that went virtual. So that still looked very beautiful, and they had that to share. And as far as platforms for writing exchange, we set up private groups in this really great global creative writing platform for teens called Write the World. And within Write the World, we had our groups, and each student had their own portfolio, and they could write their pieces and revise them, and it saves all of your previous drafts, and you can publish to the group, and then you can get feedback. And our teachers could create prompts and post things for students to read. So that worked out really well for the writing exchange. And then we just thought about, what's that experience like of coming to Iowa City and you have a roommate. We didn't want them to miss out on that. So we still assigned roommates, even though we were virtual, just to give a special quality to that relationship that they could have with somebody. And we asked them to write about, what would you pack if you were coming here? Like, what's that plus one thing that isn't on the list that you would bring with you if you were going to travel? And, we didn't want to dwell too much on not getting to be in person, but we wanted to acknowledge it and encourage them to find ways to still form bonds with each other and to just enjoy imagining and, as if we were here, and to just write about things that you can't do right now. And part of that, one of the activities, our director, Christopher Merrill, introduced a really fun prompt based on a poem, The Instruction Manual by John Ashbery. And so they wrote about Iowa City as, quote, the city I most want I wanted most to see and most did not see. And we had fun with that. And so our participants really only ever connected virtually. So following the program, there was not an adjustment where they have to take a face-to-face set of, bunch of relationships and figure out how to stay in touch. So I would say that an opportunity that emerged because our participants had been online together, they also organized again and came to us. I was just so impressed with how well they spoke up for what they needed. And they said, you didn't spend any money on our travel. And they wanted us to promise that they could come in the future. But as even this summer, there is not going to be travel to Iowa. So instead of being able to pay for travel, what we did was we started a new BTL microgrants program to support projects that our Peace in the Writing Experience participants were envisioning. And they wrote proposals, and we ended up supporting 7 new startups. And these are just incredible projects that are still going on. And our alumni are now running their own organizations together. It's really incredible. They're building creative communities around writing and other, related issues that are important to them. One of the groups is called Aster Lit, and they just put out the first issue of a literary magazine, and they've just really created this community. They had over 300 submissions from 20 countries across 5 continents. And another group that's interconnected is called Ad Aster, and they've been doing a podcast. They've discussed writing and self-care and mental health and holidays, and they've been interviewing poets that they admire. And another project called Perceptions. They've formed an international community amplifying the voices of young people with disabilities through various art forms. And another project, The World in Us, promotes cultural competency for elementary age students. So our alumni are working with other high school students and college students, and they've created their own programming, and they ran a winter break around the world in 7 days camp. So they're just doing these really incredible projects. And this, I think, is one of the opportunities just to think creatively and imagine, what else can we be doing during the pandemic? And I'm really proud of the difference that our alumni are making.
No, absolutely. Really, I am so happy, just listening to all of the things that you have just shared. It makes my heart very happy. And so just to gain a little bit more happiness here, same question for Dr. Gerlach here, opportunities and challenges as you have been implementing your program, and any lessons you would like to share with us.
Yeah, first I have to echo so much of what Alisa just shared. I mean, I think in many respects, all credit here goes to our colleagues at the IWP, because we saw the moment and felt we needed to respond and keep the high bar of the programs and the really meaningful work that we're doing. And maybe even, more than that, our students, I mean, as Alisa just described, they're incredible. And the Summer Institute students too, they're just so incredible. They've given so much to these programs. As an international educator, and after 15 years of university teaching, one central question I've had for myself is, how do I ensure the Summer Institute, and especially during the pandemic, is a vibrant space for impactful learning? In the first iteration of the program, this felt more straightforward. We engaged students in in-class discussions here on campus. Like I noted, we had excellent masterclasses and writing workshops. Students engaged each other in respectful and dynamic conversation. There was intellectualism, personal experience, and critical conscious raising. The second iteration, facing the pandemic and all virtual instruction, we had to think differently about things. So I'd like to focus on 2 of our main challenges: how to start and how to handle technology concerns. First, we began with the most obvious question: how do we redesign the Summer Institute to be a meaningful virtual program? How do we break the news to the soon-to-be participants? In the first, the redesign, we decided to create a 10-month program. So before, you'll note it was a 2-week program in person. We decided to go 10 months this time to bridge the students from selection in 2020, spring of 2020, to their invitation to an in-person program in Iowa City in 2021, this year. We called it an online pre-program. Of course, we're not bringing the group to campus this year, and we sincerely hope to be able to do that next year. In the second, we decided to explain all of this to the newly selected participants in the program invitation letter. We framed the online pre-program both as limited by the pandemic and that they wouldn't be coming to Iowa City, but as an opportunity to engage with the IWP and each other in creative ways and for a much longer period of time. And to their credit, they were remarkably understanding. In fact, they were happy we were carrying on and were excited to be a part of the program. Only one participant did not accept, and that was for separate personal reasons. Another set of challenges, which I'll also expand on a little bit later, was more complicated. Given the need to participate virtually, how would we address concerns around students' access to reliable internet and devices, perhaps mobile ones too? And given some of the program's potentially controversial or sensitive topics, such as partition or Kashmir, or the potential for participants to deal in explicit content in their own writing, how would we protect students' privacy or support their mental health needs from a distance? In the first, we polled students in the pre-program survey to learn about their access to reliable internet and devices. And we were mostly assured that we'd be okay. I grant you this is a fortunate situation to be in and is not always the case. We promised creative problem solving should students encounter problems. In the second, we decided to greatly limit direct discussion of difficult content. We would support all topics posed in students' writing and be as careful as possible during synchronous and asynchronous conversations. As for opportunities, in our redesign program, again, we had 10 months. In the formal space of the program, most importantly, we could support students during a long stretch of the pandemic. We could be there, and we have been there as a community to support their writing, to talk out their personal challenges, and to distract them also, right, with fun and new experiences. In fact, repeatedly, the students, even this morning, when I was with a group of alums, described the number of ways that they've shared that this is a family, and that the Summer Institute has really created a beautiful family. Throughout the program, they regularly told us they appreciated the part that the Summer Institute played in their lives. For example, one said, during the pandemic, when everything has been so uncertain, the Summer Institute has been the only constant source of community. It's acted as an anchor in difficult times and has made the pandemic easier to process. Another shared, when the whole structure of life around the world was falling apart, IWP kept us sane and inspired us to make the best of whatever life is throwing at us. I mean, imagine, right? Young people going through so much. So we could also try new things at the beginning. We decided for an optional kind of choose your own adventure approach. And I'll talk a little bit more about the different elements, what we did specifically in the program a little bit later. We also could make changes and additions along the way. So well into the program, students requested more Zoom events. They wanted to shift away from the asynchronous, the stuff that wasn't live in the end of the year, November, December. And so in 2021, that's exactly what we did. We listened to them and brought them a lot more live face-to-face stuff. So we did the Summer Institute Speaker Series, which brought writers from India, Pakistan, and the US to talk about elements of craft. What it's like to be a working author, and their thoughts on how their work has been received. We also did an MFA informational session, which was led by one of our mentors who graduated from the Iowa Writers Workshop. And this came about because our participants said, we've been talking about literature and our own writing and our craft for so long. We're really kind of interested in MFAs and the possibility of going to graduate school in the US. And so we did that as well. And we tried some things that didn't work too, as things go. Students over the 10 months, right, they could develop long-term relationships with each other. They could get long-term learning from their mentors, feedback, craft lessons. We could bring people around the world, right? This is a new opportunity around the country. The speaker series and other events, we have folks from Iowa City, Colorado, Washington, D.C., Abu Dhabi, Karachi, Bangalore. And our mentors, it's worth mentioning, are based in Austin, Texas, in Toronto, Canada, and one splits time between Nottingham in the UK and in Delhi. So we could create new engagement opportunities and beyond the scope of the program even. For example, after the program ended, a bunch of us, students and I, visited one of the speaker series speakers in her classroom in southern India, and we talked for 2 hours with 10th and 12th graders about writing, about cultural exchange, and about the pandemic. So we had such a range of challenges which the students met, and opportunities that we felt we were able to give them in unique ways and to help us all get through this difficult time.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that, that I personally have appreciated or utilized the most is this ability to engage with people in different time zones, different geographical locations, which previously I wouldn't have thought of engaging. And so that definitely has been one of the most impactful opportunities that has come through technology and our virtual engagement. And Dr. Gerlach, you touched on this a little bit, but just to elaborate on that, right? We all are going through this pandemic, right? We share the history of the pandemic. However, we don't share the experience of the pandemic. We are differently resourced to address the pandemic, and the impacts that we are facing are different, right? And so thinking about access to resources and thinking about cultural differences and what opportunities might be available for individuals, and not to mention thinking about the various time zones across which you have been working. So tell us a little bit about how have you thought of or ensured that there was access, equity, and inclusion built into your programs and operations as you made the shift to virtual programming?
Yeah, really important question, and was central to mind from the very beginning. I'll be the first to admit that this is, this is really challenging, and especially doing the Summer Institute for the first time online. Doing a program like this online. I had myself learned a lot from my teaching transition to all virtual instruction during the 2020 spring semester. But so the Summer Institute was just a few months later in June when it began, and we had to get going and be thinking about these important things. I think again a big part of it can be credited to the participants. So we had to think in very specific terms how this program would meet them. We had to think critically about who was in, and we had to be responsive to their needs, and we had to have the willingness to change things up if and when it became necessary. So we had regular check-ins with students about access to the internet and devices, as I touched on before, and we did this through email, and through short monthly surveys and polls. We also made sure that all the program elements were optional. -1, the participants were all required at the very end of the program to submit one piece of original writing for the digital anthology project, which will be coming out very soon. And I'm excited to share that on our website. It's going to be great. So the participants, as I touched on before, could choose from a menu of options. And this was one of the central parts, the intentionality of the program. So they could access things if and when they wanted to. Some months a lot, some months a little, some maybe not at all. Could come back to it later. We've given them actually access to all this for another year and maybe even longer. Most programming was limited to asynchronous engagement, at least to begin with. So this included the recurring monthly elements. Each month we had a new theme. And in some ways the program felt like a mini MFA program, a low residency program. So we had audio, not video, because we knew it would be harder to download from certain places around the world, recorded lectures on the month's theme that the program assistant or I would deliver ourselves. We had selected readings that were attached in PDF form or hyperlinked, nothing that would be difficult for them to find elsewhere, and everything was entirely free for them. No extra work. Was just right there. We gave them writing prompts on a variety of things, some more personal, some craft, some encouraging them to try new genres of writing. We put them also into small writing groups, and we had a sort of randomized recurring system so that they would continually meet new and more members of their cohort. Again, because it's challenging to do this online, we want to be intentional about them meeting one another and learning from one another and spreading out the centeredness of anyone's experience to share the space with everyone. The meeting arrangements were all to be determined by the participants. We wanted to leave it in their hands. They also had one-on-one meetings with their mentors, which I think was one of the participants' favorite things about the program. They got to know them so well, again, over 10 months. With all the meeting arrangements to be determined by the participants and the mentors. We had them in social media engagement in a closed Facebook group where they could all introduce one another and we could give announcements and things. We included the alumni from the previous group to encourage broader community connections. And then we had occasional synchronous all summer institute, including the alumni events. We, like Elisa noted, we diversified our learning mediums and platforms. We used ICON, which is the University of Iowa's learning management system, as our core website. Everything could be grabbed from there. We use Zoom for synchronous events, large groups, small groups, one-on-one, as I mentioned, Facebook. And the participants actually had a WhatsApp group where my staff and I were not allowed to be a part of, which was good. And they could just talk with one another, ask each other questions, and hopefully gossip too, and have the fun. During our live Zoom sessions, we were intentional about respecting students' choice to keep their cameras off and knowing that it can also help with internet bandwidth issues, and to come and go as necessary or as they felt comfortable with. We also were intentional about decentering majority students' voices and privileging those of international students and domestic students of color. We were intentional about affirming students' voices and their experiencing and giving them space, even long stretches, for them to speak. And we were willing to shake things up when they wanted the program to change to include, as I noted before, more synchronous Zoom events. So ensuring access, equity, and inclusion in the virtual shift truly meant rethinking how we were doing things while keeping front and center why we were doing them. As I told the students during the graduation ceremony, connecting with folks around the world in meaningful ways is both desirable and necessary. Our belief in a shared and interconnected humanity and our collective love for writing and literature, we've told each other many times and in many ways will always have a place, and they can even heal and restore us in times of hardship and loss.
Oops. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. And same question for Dr. Weinstein. How have you thought of access, equity, and inclusion as you have been implementing these programs virtually?
Yeah, well, for Between the Lines, we work very closely with partners who are officers at U.S. embassies around the world. So the first thing we did when we realized it was going to be virtual was to seek out their advice and find out if our participants that are in 20 different countries, do they have devices? Do they have reliable internet? Is the internet there costly? We figured out that we could offer internet reimbursement in case that was prohibitive for anybody's participation. And then, as I mentioned before, the students came to us with their concerns, which were really real and valid, that there's inequality and the infrastructure to connect. They didn't think it would necessarily work, but we talked through it and we decided together that we're going to move forward and try to make the best of this, because, to just not do it didn't seem like that didn't seem like fair or right either. So we couldn't control if people lost their internet connection, but what we tried to do was have extra staff. So in the breakout rooms with the teachers and students, we had our staff there. So if somebody lost their connection, they would let us know in the main room. And, we just kept in really tight communication to keep everything moving smoothly. And I think as students, even if they had to pop in and out, their peers kind of kept them up to date and what they were missing. And it created actually more opportunities to connect outside of the groups. And, the time zones were really challenging for some people. And for me, it was 8 a.m., which is comfortable. But it was late at night for many of our students and super early in the morning in California. But the feedback that we got from students was that it created this kind of creative intensity. And, we ran our regular dates of the program for 14 days straight. And, when you're in person, it has this intensity, and somehow being on the BTL schedule and kind of reshaping your regular life according to the BTL schedule and meeting at these different times, I think made it special and intense and maybe not ideal for waking up. They would definitely say, oh, I'm tired, but I think they also really enjoyed changing up their routines. And so what we would do each day when we would first meet for 15 minutes, it was our whole entire group together. And this was because the participants decided then to use that time to share things, about where they're from, debate whose city has the best pizza, what do you do for your birthday? This is my dog, here's my bird. We wrote haiku in the chat together in the morning. And then I was starting to get emails from students, and they would say, can I tell the group about this organization that I volunteer with? And they wanted to share with each other things that they do in their specific communities, these activities, and what's important to them in their cultures and histories. And so we made space for that. We really tried to make the virtual spaces comfortable for everyone to share just about any of their experiences and what they were going through. And they wrote, and they got to have their writing heard by others. So much support and love between them. And I think, we have 10 students in a workshop to one teacher and a staff member. And so I think that's a small space group for people to really get to feel heard and seen. And then we would do have special guest seminars, and then everyone would get to be together in a bigger group. And then we made sure to do some assignments that were really just social in nature, read a poem out loud with your roommate and discuss it. And because the poet was going to be coming the next day. So just outside of the Zoom, assigning ways to connect so they get that social interaction was really important. And I think in some ways, being virtual decentered the US in terms of power dynamics. They weren't here, but we do run BTL currently in English. In the past, it was taught here in Russian and Arabic also. But working in English, we can include more participants from other regions of the world. So there is the drawback that not everybody has access to an English language education, but then in BTL, we also try to take that opportunity, because our students are amazing and speak many different languages, to talk about the art of literary translation. And so I think they get a lot out of that environment too. And then Zoom in itself, I think, just with everyone being in their home, it was like a different space in itself. And like recently, some of our students participated in an open mic event, some of our alumni for the Global Poetry Festival that just took place. And one of the questions that came in from the audience was, where do you feel most inspired? And Zahara from Sri Lanka, one of our alumni, said, actually, it's like this on Zoom. And she referenced, when she meets with Libby and they talk about their microgrant projects and plan and do things together. And Zahara started the Fine Print Society, which is a youth, the first youth literary group in Sri Lanka through one of the microgrants. So I think the Zoom space, maybe some of us think, another meeting, but it really, it can be inspiring too. And I think particularly our Peace in the Writing Experience participants, I think they felt equally robbed of the chance to come here. And it somehow united them and leveled things out that they were, it was like another thing that they shared. And we couldn't promise that they would come here, but as I've told you, we try to give them these opportunities, and really they are the ones that just jumped at working together more closely through these grants. We thought they might do projects within their local communities, and they've chosen to keep working together. So from there, we learned that offering these kinds of grant opportunities is actually a force in helping them to deepen their connections. They meet every week, and they're still getting together, and it's widened and diversified their networks, and they've really grown as leaders as a result of that, which we're so proud of.
No, absolutely. And, as you mentioned, we are in Zoom meetings, many Zoom meetings, and but I appreciate this Zoom meeting with both of you, and I appreciate you taking time to share with us. We could just go on and on. I do have a few more questions here for our session, but just to be respectful of everyone's time, I would like to at least get a few questions from the Q&A, and we do have several questions. And so to all of our attendees, it might not be possible for us to go through all of the questions, but we'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible. And as I'm looking at the Q&A box here, I think there are several questions that have come in that came in earlier in the session, and I think some of them have been answered as you were sharing with our pre-prepared questions. But here is one of the questions very quickly, is one of the goals of the International Writing Program is to immerse participants in the American culture, and specifically Iowa. And so how did you or how might you share an Iowa City experience with participants virtually?
That's a great question. Well, I think a big part of it is how we think about the workshop experience. And so a part of it is sort of giving them an experience that they otherwise wouldn't have, and bringing, we've talked about some of our really gifted faculty, our writing mentors, and having folks who are grounded themselves, whether they're in Iowa City or not, to know about the workshop experience, and to send that out, to give the students these kinds of lessons in the development of their craft, which is partly, it's a big reason, right, why they want to join our programs. And so they really do become better writers, and they learn along the way. They tell us quite regularly, Elisa described this prompt, about Iowa City and the sort of lore of Iowa City, that they begin reading writers, who graduated from the Writers' Workshop. And they sort of absorb themselves in the culture of Iowa City, but from a distance, and hoping that one day that they'll come here. Yeah, I think Iowa City and the University of Iowa, the Writing University, is really ever present.
I'll add two things really quickly to that. we had a wonderful iCrew fella, Anna Nelson, and she did a tour around the campus one day, like live, and people could say, people who had been here before, alumni tuned in, and then our new participants, and they'd be like, oh, take me here, take me there. And I mean, in the heat of the summer, she went around Iowa City and did that tour. And then the other thing that we still did for our faculty readings that would be at Prairie Lights Bookstore, they hosted our webinars. And so we just kind of felt like we were together in Prairie Lights and imagined the books around us, and I kind of narrated that scene. So our connection to Prairie Lights, I think, is another way that we brought a little bit of Iowa City to our participants abroad.
Absolutely. And then I guess we'll take this. This is more of a logistical question. Are there links to the startups and micro grant recipients on the BTL website? And it is my understanding that the answer is yes.
I'll make sure we get them up on the website. Our BTL Instagram at BTL_UIIWP. You can find a lot of information there too, but I will make sure that if they're not on the website, we get them up there. I'd love people to see what they're doing.
Absolutely. And just in closing, and so I think it will also cover some of the questions that I am noticing here in the Q&A section. But just as we wrap up our conversation here today, very quickly, if you have any advice that you would like to share with individuals who are planning to or currently implementing programs virtually in an international setting.
Yeah, I had this list, and I think we've covered so much. So I'll keep it sort of to one idea. I want to just say briefly what I was doing before I came here for this talk. I was with because of what's going on in India right now, especially. We decided sort of yesterday to get together and just to be with one another in a Zoom space. And we were with one another, and several folks shared that they've tested positive and that they've been sick, and we were there to give our love and support for them. One who tested positive a few days ago shared this beautiful story that I'd like to tell you. For her birthday very recently, another one of the students sent a book to her, and they both happen to be sick with COVID, one in Pakistan and one who is in India now. The book, she revealed, was written by one of our writing mentors, Chandrahas Chowdhury. She said that getting the book for her birthday made her so happy, and yet until she is better, she does not want to touch it so that she doesn't have to sanitize the book. Because books, she said, are too close to her heart to touch them while she's sick. And until then, she told us she'll appreciate her new book, her good friend across the border, and the Summer Institute that brought them together. And I thought that was just such a beautiful and constant reminder of why we do the work that we do. And so I think if those who are doing this kind of work are reminded of those, I imagine we have them. To me, there's not much more than that to keep us going and to do the work so well.
Absolutely. And Dr. Weinstein, if you have any advice that you would like to share.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we've said, listening to the participants and their needs is really important. I'm really lucky with my colleagues at IWP, and our program assistant, Caitlin Plotty, is an alumni of BTL. So, her insights and contributions are just so valuable. And I'm just really inspired to every day with what our students and participants are doing. So I would say, I think because I'm an anthropologist, when I look at this program, I'm basically doing participant observation of the program, and it's become my study. And so I think just observing and listening and paying attention, if you're implementing a program, is really the most important thing.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Weinstein and Dr. Gerlach, thank you for joining us today and sharing. And I must say that just engaging today, just in this 1 hour, has brought much needed and a lot of joy to my heart. And just hearing all the wonderful things that are happening and the positive ways in which it is impacting individuals throughout our global community is just simply outstanding. So I just appreciate you for your time and for your engagement with us today, and for all the wonderful things you're doing here at the International Writings Program. So again, thank you for being with us. And I also want to thank our attendees who have joined us from all over the country and some internationally. We appreciate you joining us today and spending this Friday morning with us. So if we were in person, we would have definitely be able to witness a round of applause. But again, I appreciate, and just to maybe replicate that, I just want to again appreciate both of you and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for letting us brag about our students.
Absolutely. Well, people, that is all the time we have for today. Again, I appreciate you joining us, and I look forward to talking to you soon with yet another topic. Until then, please do take care and be well. Namaste.